Welcome to the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we make sense of modern parenting one real conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley, mom of six, former teacher, and your trusted friend helping you cut through the noise of today's parenting overload. If you've ever tried to support a child with executive functioning challenges or ADHD, but felt maybe stuck between too much advice and not enough clarity, you're in the right place. Here we bring you insights from experts who understand both the science and the real life struggles. Today, I'm joined by Laurel Black, Director of Educational Therapy and Executive Function Coaching at Research ILD. Laurel brings a dynamic, coach-informed approach to helping kids understand themselves, advocate for their needs, and succeed with strategies that feel personal and empowering. With a background in working with tweens, teens, and young adults, Laurel guides families to move from frustration to clarity, all while building resilience and connection along the way. Laurel, welcome to the show.
It's so great to be here. I love that frame. I love science. I don't know. Now you can see there's like a picture poster of a brain in the background. So I'm so excited to dive in today. And just want to really thank you for bringing that real life perspective with the science behind it, and thrilled to be part of it today.
Yeah, helping it make it all connect, right? Like there's enough information out there, but like, what do we do with it all?
Yes,
So
exactly.
to jump into the conversation today, to get us started, how did you find your way into the world of executive function coaching, educational therapy? Like, why this?
And what is that, right? Like,
Yeah.
to be honest, I didn't know what either of those things were until about 2 years ago. So my background was always in science, honestly. So I have ADHD myself, and I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was in middle school. So talk about feeling like unsure and like not fitting in. I was like, oh my goodness, what is all this stuff? And that really motivated me eventually to have this deep interest in science. So I was a biology major in college. I studied the chemistry behind that. I always wanted to know like what's really going on and what's behind it. And after that, I was like, well, I don't know if I want to just continue working in a lab all the time. So I got really curious about kind of the science of how we treat each other and interact. I've always been really interested in kind of like justice and injustice in the world, and how we treat each other the way we do, and honestly how we even treat ourselves. So after college, I became a teacher. Age 21, I went right into teaching from there with no training. I was kind of trained on the job through a program. And the only if you can imagine, the only jobs available at the time, there were hiring freezes where districts had so many teachers that wanted to keep teaching that they weren't hiring teachers. Can you imagine? And so they're like, well, we don't have a science position, but we do have a special ed / science position at a high school. Would you like that? And I was like, I'm 21. I will take anything. Yay, a job. And what I started to notice there, right, with this very kind of making observations, scientific mindset was, why are the students with learning disabilities, kids who struggle to read, kids who might struggle to conceptualize math, kids who have a hard time with language, why are they getting in trouble more? Right? If they don't have a mental health diagnosis, if they don't have ADHD, why are they still getting in trouble more? Right? It makes sense for some people. You're like, yep, I know you're taking medication for that. I get it. But for other kids, I just was really curious, especially for high schoolers, why are they getting in trouble so much? And looking at both sides of it, what are the expectations of them that they're failing to meet, and what's up with those expectations, and what makes it hard for them to meet it? So fast forward, I continued to teach at both the high school and middle school level, and then saw there was a program called Mind, Brain, and Education up here at Harvard. And I always joke like, oh, Harvard figured out the brain's involved in learning. But really, a lot of education programs and the way teachers are trained don't focus on the neuroscience of it. It's really focused on what's always been done, some observational studies, and not that much on what our brains are doing. So I did that, and then went back to the classroom and focused on middle school. So I feel like middle school, special ed, really? And to me, it's just this amazing scientific testing ground, right? I think it's so funny we're focusing on research, because moms, families, parents, educators are really the scientists out there. We're trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't all the time. So after a while, I really started to focus more and more on executive function. Like, what is getting in the way when kids, we say here, when their funnel gets clogged, when they get overwhelmed, what's getting in the way? And I heard about ADHD coaching. And as someone with ADHD, I hadn't heard of that. I didn't know what that was, but it sounded nice. So I signed up for a training program for that. And what it really is actually like life coaching focused on kids with ADHD or those who struggle with executive function. And it was just a perfect fit for me because what we do is we really say, what do you notice is going on when that comes up for you? Okay, what could we try? Okay, next week, let's see how it went. And so I love that there really is this just observational kind of hypothesis development and testing day to day in our lives. So that was a long answer, and you could tell it's full of passion and joy because it's like we'll never have the answers, but man, we'll have some good tries and we'll come up with some solutions. So
I love that. And like that's how we
yeah,
learn, right?
yeah,
Too is like
yes,
every failure, I guess, is like one more step closer to like the idealized solution, right? And so I
yeah,
love that
and
you
that's the spirit.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. I mean, as parents, we're doing that, right? Like we're also asking our toddler, is it okay if we cut your banana this way today? Or do we need to have it another way? Or can I peel it? Or can I not peel it? Like we're testing things like
yes,
with of our
yes,
2-year-old.
exactly, exactly.
It's kind of like that universal thread for parenting and understanding our children. So I love that you bring that
Absolutely.
in. We also have another guest, Mindy, who has been on the
Mhm.
podcast or will have on the podcast. Can you share a little bit more about your guys' dynamic? Because you guys are both at Research ILD.
Yes, yes. So Mindy is wonderful. She has a lot of, she's Dr. Mindy. She has a PhD in really the neurological roots of attention, almost like visual attention. So she really goes deep with the science and the research behind what it is that kind of draws us to attention and what causes it to start to fade, which I'll also get into today. I just, in full transparency in the Launch Family podcast, I do not have children of my own. So my work, in a way, the way I see that as beneficial to parents is I'm a beacon of the research. I'm a beacon of the practices. I don't say, well, here's what I did with my kid. Trust me, because my kid is not your kid. So I am definitely like a beacon of the research and what the best practices say. So that's where I come in. Mindy is a parent. She is a mother. She is a researcher. She is a scientist, and she helps us really develop our curriculum here at Research ILD. So we have curriculum called the SMARTS curriculum, and I laugh because it's all the stuff that man I wish I had when I was a kid. It teaches the executive function strategies that we were never taught and then are kind of ashamed of. So time management, being late, organizing our stuff. I was going to say junk, but it's not all junk, mom. It's not all junk, mom, right? Like there's good stuff in there, but just organizing things. Like I know as teachers and as parents, we get really caught in the like, well, should I just organize it for you and say, do it like that? Or should I don't know how to teach you to do that if you're a messy kid. So Mindy brings it all together, and her expertise is really in developing curriculum and practices, especially for younger kids. So I would say my expertise is more in the SAS zone of middle school on up, and she is in the experimental, emotional eruption and I guess childhood SAS version of younger kids. So we kind of come together kind of at different developmental stages. And she has some just amazing insights from, again, real life bridging into the science as well. So I believe she'll be talking about something called Smarts at Home, which is where you don't have to rely on teachers to teach those things. You can start to do that with kids, as young as 4, right? Your toddler has lots of opinions. So what I will talk about today is how you can kind of get curious about those opinions. And Mindy will dive a little bit deeper into kind of younger kids.
Definitely like complementary episodes, kind of
Yes.
where your child is on the spectrum could be a good place to start too, as far as their age. But definitely grateful that our listeners are here today too to get some insights that are universal, just may look a little bit more towards like that teen young adult age range too. So I want to come back to something that you mentioned, which was that you have lots of strategies, but not really like an answer. So talk me through that. What does that mean for parents that are at home with their kids and navigating daily life?
Yeah. Well, and I always think, education starts at home, right? Kids, like I love that we started, even though I'm not an expert in 2-year-olds, like I think toddlers are 2 years old, right? Like I think that's how that works. But that they are so curious, and on this almost silly theme of like them being scientists, they don't know what works best for them yet, even if they say they do. They might say it because of what you said, they want to actually try something different, that a teenager would do the same. And so I know parents can feel really trapped of like, but this is what you said you wanted. Like I have witnessed that with my nephew. We're like, well, we cut the mango this way. This is what you said you wanted. Oh, but when he saw the way that I cut it, just my, let's get it down the hatchway for myself as a grown up who was in a rush, he wanted it my way. Right. And it's like, they don't actually know what it is they want yet, but that's where the experimenting come in. So when I say that we have our SMART strategies, it's a whole curriculum. Let's see, I have some display items over here. Like one of the things is super basic, but it's just like a checklist that you can have and say, wait, what do we actually need to do? Let's jot it down. Wait, do you want to jot it down or should I? This is a nice strategy, but some kids might say, no, I want to use a sticky note. Or some kids might say, well, can I try this first step? And then you can remind me what the second step is. I want to see if I can remember it without the list. Okay, I'm not saying that this is the answer, but man, this is a nice tool to use to test out what works for your kid. And the deeper reason that I know we'll get into, because this is what I'm most passionate about, is no strategy is going to work unless your kid feels like it's relevant for them and that it's their choice. So you could have the best strategy in the world. We all want things to be just more streamlined for our kid. We want them to be in less pain and less angst and less anguish. And the strategy you suggest, I always joke the fastest way to get a good strategy to fizzle is for an adult to tell it to a teenager. And so that's part of it too, is like, okay, the strategy is a strategy, but what we'll talk about today is like how to plant the seed for that until your kid feels like they've turned it into their own answer.
So tell me, how do we do that?
Yeah. So that's where, again, I'm not a parent, but man, have I had a lot of kids say, nah, that's okay, miss, or nah, I don't think so, or yeah, I'll try it. Right. That's the biggest trick in the book, is saying, okay, I'll try it. And then the next week it's like, oh, you said you were going to try it and you didn't. Do I get you in trouble for that? Or like, you got what you deserve then, right? It's just so tricky when kids almost do agree with you and then don't use that strategy. So I've learned this both through trial and error, through my own stripe, and eventually through training. So there's two kind of elements of my own training, and this is where I'm like the beacon of the research, that are going to go a long way also for parents. So one of them is what I'll call the coach approach. And another one is a program called collaborative problem solving, which was developed in Massachusetts by Dr. Ross Green and Stuart Ablon. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a big, yes, okay. It's a big part of just how I operate. And I'll get into kind of the quick version of what those mean. So both of them kind of acknowledge that, yes, us grownups, we've lived life, we know our kids, we think we really have the answers. And we're like, can you please just do it this way? Can you please just try this? Right? Can you please just start your homework sooner? Then you can go play and not worry about it, right? And for some reason, it either causes arguments, or you have a compliant kid who says, okay, and then they just don't, or nothing happened, right? Or nothing. So what both a coach approach and collaborative problem solving would have us do is really focus on getting curious first. So if there's an expectation you have, or even like a social norm, like some parents talk to me like, well, why doesn't my kid say thank you or like goodbye to people, right? Just like a standard concern you have that they're just not meeting a pretty standard expectation, you can insist that they do it. You could try that, see how it goes. That's appropriate for a lot of things as a parent. You have to kind of set expectations and boundaries. You could also say, oh my God, we just need to go. Let's just go. I don't care. We'll deal with it later. And then what collaborative problem solving posits is there's a middle ground. There's what they call plan B, which is, hey, I'm curious. What is it about when we get home, it's after school, what's been tough about making sure you kind of get all your stuff from school back where it needs to be in the house? I know there's something tough about that. Can you fill me in? Rather than like insisting, how many times do I need to tell you? You've said, my dad used to call it a booby trap. He'd be like, you set up a booby trap again, right? And humor goes a long way. But that shift to being curious instead of telling, because the problem will keep happening if you haven't addressed kind of the root of why it's happening. And as parents, we may make assumptions about why it's happening, and we might even be right. But until your kid realizes why that's problematic, whatever suggestion you suggest to them isn't going to resonate for them if they don't really have a precise idea of what it is that makes that hard.
It makes so much sense too. And like, I think it's easier said than done though too, right? Like, especially if
Like,
it's not like innately our response is to be like,
yeah.
me, you know? And like the way that you put it so delicately, I feel like I would have been like, tell me, why is your backpack still on the floor? You know, maybe that I need to not do that. That's maybe a little too like
Well,
judgy
we'll get into that. And
question, but
it's,
um yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's also, we are the results of a big science experiment. No, not really. But we were conditioned a certain way, right? Our parents didn't sit back and be like, how can I use a coach approach with my child to get Jessica to be the best woman she can be when she grows up? It's like, no, we all are just doing our best. And that's where a lot of what I'll say today is going to be really relevant in talking to spouses, talking to teachers, and talking to coworkers as well, because we know they're all just a bunch of like grown up little kids still, right? So it is really hard. And what you'll leave with today, I'm hoping, are just some phrases, and you'll be able to pick out a few that sound like something you would say. Uh, so
Yes. No,
we'll have
I'm
some
excited
options.
to dive deeper in because it's like, okay, I can ask a question, but also like, what is the actual content that I'm asking for? What
Right.
is that
Yeah.
experience that follows up the question?
Yeah.
One of the things that you had talked about in our initial discussion was like this coach approach, and I want to take this a little bit
Mhm.
further here. What is the grow model? And how can that help parents guide through those challenges that they're facing?
Yeah, so there's 3 models to get us started with, like, wait, what do you want me to say what to my kid? Like, when they're screaming and saying they don't want to do something, what do you want me to say? So there's 3 things we'll go on. The first one is called the GROW model, and that's truly from, honestly, like, life coaching. And so you may say, okay, I have an 8-year-old. We're not life coaching. But when we really get down to it, as any human being, we need to feel kind of driven forward in our behavior. And sure, kind of like threats or promises or chore charts, like those are important parts of parenting, and they don't get at a deeper level of almost like habit formation and character building. So there's 3 things I'll talk about. The first one is the grow model. The next one is our own smart strategy called can do goals, and you'll kind of see how those are connected. And then finally, something that overlaps quite a bit called WOOP. So you kind of, again, pick the one that sounds right for your style of parenting. So the grow model is the idea that um, any kind of behavior is basically a version of pursuing a goal. And as parents, you're like, yeah, I know they're trying to avoid this, or yeah, they're trying to get this. So that's fine. Consider this model. So the grow model will help shift into more of a coaching mindset, which is first, ask your kid what it is they're trying to achieve, what they want, or what they're hoping for.
Mm.
Right? An 8-year-old might not be able to tell you what their aspirations are, but you could say, well, what's your hope for summer camp? Okay. Right. They're nervous. They're not sure if they want to go. It's sleepaway. That's scary. Okay. Well, what's your hope? How would you really like to feel at summer camp? What do you think? It could also be for older kids, like, well, what is your goal for when you're starting ninth grade? That's a big shift. How do you want to feel either at the beginning of it or the end of it? So, goal, I actually kind of lean away from using the word goal because it sounds like, what do you want to be in 5 years, right? Your 5-year plan. Goal could also be, hey, I know that this application is due September 1st. Like, let's talk about some timelines. What do you want to do by the end of this week towards that? And that's its own mini goal, right? So G in the GROW model just stands for clarifying that goal in the first place rather than just, I need to work hard. It's like, oh, let's clarify. Then the R in the GROW model, it, I really like, it's basically a reality check. Like, what's your current reality? And then, like, is that goal still realistic then? If so, fine. But it also gets to this idea of anticipating obstacles before you encounter them. So let's say a kid is feeling anxious or worried. Great. Bring it on. Like, let's talk through those. Let's lay those out. So the R is what's called the reality check. Like, well, how are you feeling? How much time do you have? How much energy do you have tonight? Okay, let's be realistic. And then from those 2 things, right? What's kind of your hope or vision? What they would say your goal. Then R is let's do a little reality check. O is one of the most powerful things psychologically is what are our options? And that is where, as a parent, you finally get to make some suggestions. Because let's say you suggest, well, you could always start on that application tonight, knowing very well that your kid's not going to do that. And then if they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, you could say, okay, well, what would you do instead? So I sometimes intentionally plant the seed of an option that I know they're going to reject, or, well, I could always remind you, or, well, I could just always stay there until you're ready. Like, the kids don't want that. They want some independence. So I almost intentionally plant a couple options that I know they won't want because it forces them to start to problem solve. And then along the way, it's kind of a brainstorming session. You can plant some really realistic options like, okay, so we've got these two. Let's see. Could I make a suggestion, honey? What if you like ask your friend to sit down and do some read with you or work with you while you work on your application? Or, I have some work to do, right? That term is called body doubling. But you wouldn't start out and say, honey, I really want to help you. Why don't you sit next to me while I read and you can work and we'll put some good music on? You'll want to kind of build it up and like bake this concept in for, right? You're like, what a great idea. Hey, you need to do homework. Do you want me to sit with you? But what you've done is kind of laid the groundwork of reality without any sort of excuses coming up yet. Or you've almost embraced the excuses to be like, okay, well, if that's the case and you hate your teacher and this class is stupid, what are our options? Right? To still get a good grade. And then W in the GROW model is, okay, so what's the way forward? What do you want to do? And there's a lot of different layers of psychology that go in each of those steps. I think the most powerful one is both the options, right? And that's where you get to finally say what you think your kid should do. And then the way forward is the ownership piece of like, okay, well, you've rejected all these other ones. So I'm excited to see how that goes for you. When can we check in to see if it worked? Okay, tomorrow. Right? You can still have boundaries, you can still have limits. And like, okay, that's your commitment. I'm here if you need anything. So that's the GROW model.
Yes, so incredible. Like I love the examples that you gave too of like the structure and like the strategy for how to propose the options. Like don't go in with your strongest one first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like reserve that for a minute.
Right.
I could
Because then they can
definitely
be like, oh, come on, mom. But then you know what? That other thing you said, that one was stupid, but like that one was good. Right. So
yeah. Or like even having like to your point too earlier of like having a little bit of humor, right? Like even an
yes.
outlandish suggestion
Yeah.
would be like, oh
Yeah.
wait, I'm actually gonna listen to what my mom's saying right now because I don't know
Yes.
where she's going with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have a strategy that's actually part of Smarts at Home that Mindy's going to talk about. And I have set goals with a 5-year-old about wanting to tie their shoes. And it follows the same kind of flow. So our can do goal lesson is very similar. It's just a little bit more concrete for you. So the can do goals is that what you're pursuing has to be really clear. It has to be appropriate. There has to be a numerical value to it. So for that, it's like, well, I'd like to tie my shoes um, by myself by the time I start first grade, right? Then it's numerical. It's appropriate. I think. I don't actually know kids that age that well, but it worked for him. And then the D and the O are the part that really separates you. Like, isn't smart a SMART goal? Is that what I'm hearing you say? No. So something that really differentiates our can do goal from SMART goals is that D stands for we need to break it down into doable steps.
I love
So
that.
cool that you have that goal. We love that for you, honey. Tell me how it's going to happen. And that's where it could be something like this. The can do goal lesson comes with its own sheet just for that as well. And then the juiciest part is the O. And what O stands for in that case is that we've considered obstacles. So, man, getting a 5-year-old to anticipate obstacles in advance, yep, that can be done. And they're usually really pragmatic about it. I did that with I did a sibling of that student who was, I think, 7 at the time. And his goal was to be able to wrap Christmas presents in Minion wrapping paper before Christmas.
I love
And
it.
we did it. Like he did it. I don't live with him, but he did it because we anticipated the obstacles. And it's stuff that's like, oh, like you don't want to have to tell your kid, like, oh, the wrapping paper is sold out, so your whole goal is trashed. Guess what? We anticipated that in advance. He said if there were no Minion wrapping paper, we could go to the store and get something different. I was like, they'll probably look online. And good to think ahead. Yes, that's a good option. Right. And so I'm an expert in adolescence. However, these strategies can still work for really young kids as well. And it builds that flexibility in advance. So that's our can do goals. And then finally, there's a version that's often for older kids. So maybe college kids or like partners or people at work, even, which is WOOP. And that's really similar to both of these. I'm just kind of giving credit where credit's due. So WOOP stands for what's your wish? visualize the, man, I might get these two O's confused. Anyway, take your pick of the O's. Maybe it's WOOP with three O's. Okay. What's the ideal outcome? So that's almost making it realistic. So what's your ideal outcome? What are the obstacles? And what's your plan? I would add an O in there for what are your options, but it's like all those O's are great, right? But theirs is really what's your wish, and then so what is that? The idea of visualizing it really truly, right? Like I've worked with college students who say, "Yeah, I'll go to office hours," and it's like, tell me what that would look like. Like what is the outcome of that? Really, truly, and that helps us almost backwards figure out the obstacles and things to navigate. So those are kind of the three things that you could use at home. Um, I don't know if there's like a resource guide for parents, but so we had the GROW model, Can Do Goals, and WOOP. They're on the
Awesome. And
internet.
we'll be sure to like link resources too in the show notes for
Yeah,
all of the parents that are listening in
great.
today. I do want to, contextualize this too. And I think you did a great
Mhm.
job as you were describing the models, but can you share an example of maybe a time that a family that you worked with a student that used the GROW model and like what did that transformation look like?
Yeah. So in our work here, which is available on Zoom, by the way, so I know you guys are not in Massachusetts, but we work one-on-one with kids here. I do that personally, and I supervise a team of other coaches that do this. So what's interesting about that is the kids don't walk themselves here to sign up for services. The kid, the 12-year-old does not Google executive function coaching and then sign up with us, right? It's usually parents. And as you can imagine, you're probably like, well, Laurel, didn't you just say not to make kids do things? You're like, I don't know, how's that going to go? So in our work here, so much of what we do is first based on kind of kids understanding themselves. And we start that pretty young. Just understanding themselves and sometimes what gets in the way. And so I'm going to show you something we do, and I'm going to come back to your question in a second. That a lot of what we do is in getting to know each other is like what's hard for you, what's okay for you, or sometimes, and what are you great at. So we will use some sort of method like this to help kids build like self-understanding first, and then from there start to figure out the strategies that work for them. From there start to figure out what really resonates for an approach they would want to try. And now I actually did forget your question. It's like I was going somewhere.
No,
I don't have the document in front of me. What was the question again? This is where you get to like do your editing and make it
yeah,
work.
it's all good. Like the transformation, like how does this actually work?
Yes. Okay. Yep. Great. Okay. So what I said so far was fine. And then I'll get to my answer. I was like, ah. Um, okay. So I'll hold these up again. So with these, I have an example of a couple students who came in and either kind of put everything, what we'll do is either list things out on sticky notes and have them place them here just to kind of normalize that kid's experience. Like I have kind of an ADHD symptom card sort that I'll use. And they'll sort like, is this often true for you, sometimes true for you, or not true for you? So I had a student come in who his lowest grade the year before was in math. He was a seventh grader. Yep. I know middle school is just what an age. Um, so he was a middle schooler and math had been his lowest grade the year before. And I asked him about math and that was really one of I think it didn't even make it onto red. He put it like past red. And when I asked him about it, he would just say, I used all my best practices and be like, well, what's tough about math? What is it about math? Like, tell me when it's time to do math, what comes up for you? And his answer was always just, I'm stupid. That was his go-to. And when you think about that, I actually had to ask kind of my mentor about this. I was like, that's a good answer. Because how do you argue? Like, what do you do with that answer? Right? As a seventh grader, you can't just argue and say, you're not stupid. Right? And it's kind of a catch-all answer because it's really hard for adults to know what to do with that. And so with this student, he wouldn't do his math homework because it was kind of the hopeless, helpless, like, well, it's not going to make a difference. Math is not for me. And that happens with a lot of kids, unfortunately. And so what I shared with the parents, first off, was just to get curious, continue to get curious. Like, don't give up. If he says he's stupid, say, okay, that must be tough. And the first thing is to really empathize with kids. So what my mentor suggested is just empathize and say, oh, that's a tough feeling. I can't imagine how hard it must be to get started if you feel like, and we emphasize that word feel, if you feel like you're stupid. And using a coach approach, I use that here, and I worked with the parents to use the similar language at home, was kind of like, well, oh, you're stupid. Okay, that must be tough to feel. Are you stupid in every class? Because I see some grades over here that it's not every class, so there must be something about math that makes you feel more stupid, right? I didn't argue with him. I just really got curious about like, oh man, I hear you. What a tough way to feel. Let's get nuanced though, right? What is it then about math that makes you stupid, right? I didn't even argue. I was like, let's do your language, not mine. But okay, if you're stupid, what is it about math that means you're stupid at math? And what we were able to do is kind of disaggregate, oh, I'm not stupid as a person. It's that in math, it goes really fast. And when I stop paying attention for a little bit, I feel like I'm so far behind and I can't get caught up that day. And then he wasn't necessarily a kid that went and asked for help, right? Yet, because he was stupid. What good would help do if you're stupid? So after working with him, what we started to do is build that nuanced self-understanding to be able to like chip away at that mindset. And this year, when he came back as an 8th grader, he was just much more like gentle with himself. And then I want to tell a little bit of a story about the parent side of this. So when he came in, as you can imagine, parents brought him here because his grades were low and they want the best for him, right? They don't need him to get straight A's. They were noticing that really low self-concept while he was here. And they would nag him about homework. They're like, you're a smart kid. Why are your grades so low? Um, and over time, I encourage them to like almost don't argue with him when he says he's right. Don't argue or try to prove him wrong about what he's saying. And when he would come here, he told me that they would nag him and they were so strict. And we talked a lot about what would it take for them to nag you less or be less strict? Like, what would that take? And he's like, it'll never happen. So we kept plodding along, kind of like building that self-understanding. Parents continued to almost nag less, right? They'd say, okay, up to you. We'll see what happens, right? Going back to that scientist mindset, like, okay, you want to try it that way? We'll see what happens. And he really started to develop this grace with himself of trying to just try it out. And then he'd update his parents on how it was going without them having to nag. And so what that did is by anticipating what it was that parents would nag about, like we could address that in order to get them off his back, while I was kind of on the side being like, yeah, don't nag him. He said he actually wanted to handle this himself. So ironically, nagging less helped them nag less while still upholding those same expectations, right? That eventually we do expect you to pass.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's like mind blowing to me as a parent too, because I'm like, well, if I don't nag them, if I don't remind them, then they're going to forget, right? But what you've really done is that he now has that ownership piece, and like he's going to be the one at the end of the day who succumbs to whatever the decision was, right? And he's going to do that anyway. Like whether I'm nagging or not, if I just stop nagging, then maybe he'll rise to the occasion. So,
And I even have a sticky note here that I did that same process. I use a lot of the same process with another student. And the sticky note says, trying to stop nagging with nagging won't work. And you can imagine if we go back to what we were talking about before of, well, what would it really take though, buddy, to get that homework done, to get them off your back? And you can imagine the suggestion I gave was, well, do you want your parents to remind you to do your homework? And that's where he was like, come on, trying to stop nagging with nagging won't work. But I loved that frame of, if you want your parents off your back, what would it take? Do you want them to remind you about getting them off and so it was just this really funny kind of loop with two, middle school boys, that was like, they don't want to need to be nagged, but they don't really know the path ahead to get it to stop. And as parents, I know you know that.
oh yeah. No, and I'm also thinking like other contexts too, right? Like if you're in a leadership role or maybe you're co-parenting or a spouse or living with others, like there's household duties, right? Like I feel like there's always that dynamic of nagging or like who's gonna step in and do it. Um
Right.
so that's a great tool just to, multiple contexts there. When it comes to like the children that you work with and also just for context, like my background is much younger. Like I taught kinder through second grade. My oldest child is 9. And so I'm like anticipating, okay, these are all of the things we're going to be going through in the next couple years.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, children that are maybe neurodiverse, maybe there's like ADHD mixed in, can you walk us through a little bit more about either from the parenting standpoint or like the practical research-based standpoint too, of like how does this differ than maybe like a neurotypical child? Especially if you have like a mixed house, right? Like I have 6 children. My second one has ADHD, and so things look a little different when I'm approaching him. So I'm sure that there's other parents too in that situation.
Yeah. So what I'll start with is that our expertise at Research ILD is in executive function. And so that's everything that kind of a book on the shelf, my bookshelf, there's like smart but scattered. So that's organizing, prioritizing, setting goals, monitoring how it's going, which is where we often get really lost, and remembering. And so with ADHD, those are often compromised. And what I will say in the and, as since you mentioned kind of neurodiverse and a mixed household, is man, those things are also compromised depending what age you are, what parents are modeling for you, and like what the expectations and systems are in your house. So executive function, those things can also be compromised when you think about anxiety. The one that's most compromised there is your goal appropriate right now? Right, it's almost like you hold yourself to like too high of a standard in a way, and then the monitoring is often inaccurate because you're like too critical or too hard on yourself. And as parents, you're like, oh my goodness, honey, no one cares about that. But you can't tell that to a 12-year-old girl who's like, everybody's looking at me. That's just how their brains are wired. So executive function can also like be compromised sometimes with anxiety. With something like autism, it can be hard to gauge what your appropriate goal is if it's harder to sense and integrate kind of social cues and social norms. There's also that candid honesty that often comes out with autism of why is it that way? Why is that the norm? Why is that the expectation? And so when you think about the areas of executive function that I mentioned before, goal setting is one of them. Self-monitoring is another one. And so when there's lack of clarity of what on earth the goal is in the first place, then it will look like kids are scattered, distracted, and like sometimes don't care or unmotivated. But when there's just not clarity on the goal, or if this kid doesn't feel that the goal is relevant for them, it can look like they have ADHD. Because the executive function, I think most classically is associated with ADHD. So as a parent, it's important to consider what it is we're expecting of kids at certain ages, what we're modeling for them, and my big focus is like the way we talk to them about it. And so as a parent, as you're navigating those things, whether you have your kid has a diagnosis or not, it's important to just empathize and be curious first, because then you can start to rule out, are they just really struggling because there's been a lot going on lately and there's a transition? Or is this a true consistent pattern, almost like regardless of the circumstance? And an analogy, I have two analogies I'll use that are used a lot now in research. One of them is when it comes to goal-directed behavior, which is still executive function, right? It's kind of this part of our brain that's on my poster. This directs us towards our goal. So if you don't have a clear goal in the first place, it's then really hard to monitor it. So as parents, you can really hone in and use that can-do goal lesson from the SMARTS curriculum, or you can use the grow model. Like, wait, what is it that we're actually expecting of ourselves with a kid with anxiety? Wait, honey, where did that expectation come from? Did someone tell you that it needed to have that much glitter and like perfect lines and stickers? Or do you just want it to look that way because you like it that way? Like, where did that expectation, and find to maintain that expectation of yourself. And let's be clear on where that expectation comes from. So when you're considering like, is this typical behavior or is this kind of atypical, like neurodivergent behavior? Those are important questions to ask. And executive function can be hard for kids depending on the age, but also depending on their diagnosis.
I love those kind of like caveats too, right? Like we need to
Mhm.
understand developmentally where our children are. Like, are the expectations maybe we're setting on them
Yeah.
inappropriate based on their age versus like jumping to maybe a diagnosis or some other kind of like way or path to try to sort
Yeah.
out what's actually
Yeah.
happening.
Right.
One of the other
Right.
things that you mentioned was like household systems, right? And
Mhm.
so can we jump into that a little bit more? Because I think like as parents that are listening, we're like, okay, well, what else do we need to maybe what systems should we be considering? Like, what is a household system? what are options, strategies that we could maybe have a little bit more oversight of?
Yeah. Again, I will say I don't have answers. I have ideas. So I think the first route to really figuring that out is to almost ask, like, I use the grow model and can do goals with myself.
Mm,
I use
love
them
it.
with myself. So I would encourage your listeners to think about, okay, so what is it that you're actually hoping for in your household, right? What's the current reality? I'll do can do goals this time. So do you have a clear goal of what it is you're actually hoping for? First off, right? I'm not going to tell you a strategy because I'll like coach your listeners on this. What is it that you envision? I actually work with parents too. So a parent recently who she herself has ADHD. There's a lot of this coming up where like when your child gets diagnosed with ADHD, a lot of parents will be like, well, the apple in the tree, like, well, I have ADHD too, it turns out. I hear a lot of that, and I work with a lot of parents who have ADHD. And for her, we spent about 15 minutes just getting really precise on what it is that she's hoping for. And it turned out that, kitchen counters, what are those for? And it turns out they're for everything. And anytime they're just a landing pad for everything. But we had to get really precise of what it was she expected of her family and of that space. So we got into like, well, what does that space function as right now? Because stuff's ending up there for a reason. Oh, it's because it's a landing pad for mail that I haven't decided what to do with because I don't have time right now. Um, so yes, cool to want a clean kitchen counter, but what is the ultimate vision for yourself? And from there, right? Okay, is that an appropriate goal given that you have 6 children? Okay, then from there, by when can you tackle this? It's summer. You guys want to relax. Like, when is an appropriate time and to what level? Then what would the steps be to get that to really happen? It's always like, do you want to talk to your spouse? Do you want to talk to the other people in your community? Do you want to talk to your friends? Do you want to get some childcare, right? Like, what would it take to make that happen? And then what are some of the obstacles? And so I know I'm not giving you an answer about systems, but part of that process should also involve your kids,
Mm,
right? If you're just going to come at them with a system, you're just going to be another adult telling them what to do, which their life is already full of. So I like to almost have a little, and this is where I'm going to show you some of my kind of tools that you can use to have the conversation. So I'm not going to tell you the systems. I'm going to tell you how to talk to your family about it. So I already kind of showed you red, yellow, green cards. I would suggest that every family just have some red, yellow, green space in their house because it helps make decisions. So let's say you already have a great system in place. You're like, we're going to have this mail thing. And when the kids come home, they're actually going to have snacks so that they can go directly outside instead of like coming in, making a mess. And that gives me some quiet time to deal with their stuff while they're playing and had their snack. They don't have to like go take like, they're not dumping anything yet.
yeah.
But talk to them of like, well, what would make that really happen? What kind of snacks do you guys want? And as you brainstorm ideas, each of those ideas, you can sticky note on like, well, how realistic is that? Which idea do we actually want to commit to as a family? And it makes them feel like they're in it with you, even if it was just one tiny part of the system. Right. So this mom, it was like she ended up coming up with the idea that she needed quiet time health in order to regulate after work. So she wanted her kids to just get their snack and go to a place where she knew they'd have stuff to do without her telling them what to do. And that they're a 5 and a 3-year-old. So she's like,
Yeah.
they have their play space. They know what they can do. They got their snack. And that gave her time. So in order to get them to actually do that, she wanted to build their buy-in by letting them almost like choose their snacks that could be in the bin or something so that they felt like they were part of it. Another one that I find is really helpful is this is something I made. It's easy to kind of make one yourself, is like a family habit tracker where it's like you want your kids to do something. We'll show them that you're also tracking a habit. And it's also a great way for parents to stay accountable to their own goals. Like when kids know that you do want to exercise more, or kids know that you do want to, eat a vegetable with each meal, whatever, like have them help track you and track themselves, where there's almost like family accountability. It's not just mom and dad telling you what to do. You get to tell them what to do too. And man, there's been a lot of research in the field of just like healthcare, right? Like this is research actually done by a healthcare company, and like United States, we don't love healthcare companies, right? But there's some interesting research that came out that one of the best ways to improve family health was by basically, there was a program that like gave kids points towards a trip to Disney if their parents met certain outcomes.
Oh my gosh, I
So it's like,
love
oh,
this.
your whole family will get a trip. Now, I can't promise that to everyone, but like
Yeah.
we'll take a trip if I'm able to meet these goals. And that's not really a direct suggestion for families, but just having your kids help hold you accountable is so powerful. And then it's really building like a family dynamic of like you can have your goal and two kids can have their goal. And what's here is just check marks and then why that matters to them. And that's kind of a coach approach too, is like, cool that you want to have vegetables. What makes that matter? And that actually is one of mine. Um, I said that, I tell myself it matters and I always forget. It's because I'm eating fried chicken. But having someone else or that peer accountability, sibling accountability, or family accountability can be really powerful too. And it could go back to the same strategy for, tidiness or hygiene that you want families to use as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of like for me as a parent listening in, I'm like, okay, well, this is maybe like a levelizer, right? Like we all live in the same house. We
Mhm.
like our spaces tidy and clean. And like what happens if someone's stuff is in our space? Like we get frustrated, but we also get frustrated if someone moves our stuff from the space.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
like, okay, well, then we can't be on both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
What are some things that we need to do in order to like make
Yeah.
sure this is,
Yeah.
unharmed?
Yeah.
So it does feel like maybe a weight is lifted if it's like on the
Oh
kids
my
too.
goodness.
Of like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't have to nag because nagging
Right.
isn't gonna get me anywhere.
Or making it visible as like, hey, you said you wanted to do it. Awesome. I encourage you to continue to try to want to do that, but honey, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. And one of the like I'll just put a plug in here for Skylight Calendar. That's
mhm.
one of the tools that we're using right now for them to like
Okay.
visualize their chores. It's
Wow.
like a
Yeah. Yeah.
little checklist of like,
Yep.
okay, here's
Yep.
my habits that I'm doing. And me and my husband are both on there too. Like
Okay. That was going to be my question. Yeah.
it is like a big calendar over there. You have to scroll through all of our family members.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's a great way to like we're all accountable to it. And I noticed too, like if we slack off, like if we're not checking it for maybe a day or two, or like we're only doing
hmm
it on the app instead of the device itself, the kids like don't even check it. And it's like, well, did you do your chores? Yeah, I did. Okay, well, did you mark it off? Like, are we like celebrating the fact that you were independent on this too?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that modeling of
Yeah.
behavior, I think, is also
And
another.
think how rare it is that the phrase I could have used 20 times in this episode so far is like, and you're just another adult giving kids well meaning advice. How often do kids get to give adults well meaning advice? Never. So, like, think about actually what a good feeling that is to feel like you're contributing, helping, and having a voice in a way that kids really rarely have. They get asked like cute questions about their favorite things, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Like, so to have them feel like they're really contributing to the family, that they really have a voice and some agency is like mind blowing to them.
One of the activities that I did actually as a classroom teacher is we would have classroom agreements and we would just talk about like, what does this space need to look like? How are we going to talk to each other? What does it feel like
Mhm.
when someone talks to us in this certain way? And so
Yeah.
one of the things that is on my list for this summer is to actually come up with family agreements. Now that my
Yeah.
children are old enough to be able to articulate and understand different like social contexts and things. But like have that be something that's really collaborative with them too, because they do have a voice in how we talk to each other and how
Yeah.
like we operate our household. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah, and I love the coach add-on to that is as silly as it sounds, right? And I think I always just alert adults, like parents, teachers, we think we know more than we do. So what I would encourage you to do and teachers who are doing classroom agreements is follow up every suggestion with, yeah, and what makes that important to you or to us? Where we think we already know and we think it's obvious or unspoken. But first of all, to some kids, especially those who are caught up in their own thoughts or maybe have autism or anxiety or ADHD, they weren't paying attention. It just gives another layer of relevance because another element that really drives human motivation to commit to something is the connection piece. We need to feel connected to each other and to our own purpose. And I know that sounds very lofty for like a 4-year-old, but it does. 4-year-olds are some of the most like generous, caring, nurturing creatures on this planet, right? So following up that agreement or that request with, okay, what makes that feel important? It just gets actually what it gets to their values and their character.
It also
So
feels like
really
it
tough.
almost brings more weight too, right? Like, oh, it's not just
Yeah.
something I'm saying just to give an answer or a
Yeah.
perspective. It's like, oh no, this is actually I own this thought or I own this
Yeah.
idea a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
As we're having these conversations with our kids, what is the role of empathy too? Because I think that you talked about like this connection piece, which empathy is just
Mhm.
part of that.
Yeah.
So, for kiddos that are feeling like scattered or inconsistent or motivated, or unmotivated, excuse me, what are some of the ways that we can express empathy, like maybe phrases or,
Yeah. Yeah.
actions that we could do to maybe lessen that? Uh,
Yeah. And this is where I'll get very scientific with you. One of the fastest ways, and this is from my training with, they're called Think Kids at Mass General Hospital. So this is Dr. Stuart Ablon in the collaborative problem solving program there, is a lot of research shows us something called the neurosequential model. And neurosequential means that we can only really handle certain levels of demands in an order that maybe some of us teachers would relate to, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or something. But the idea is that we first need to relate, then regulate, then reason. Which is interesting because often we so quickly want to help kids regulate. We want to do deep breathing and like get them level headed. The fastest way to like comfort or console a child who is having a hard time, I don't even want to say upset, but just like having a hard time. Maybe they're not even showing a lot of emotion yet, or maybe they really, 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 really are. The fastest way to regulate another human being, not even a child, just another human being, is to empathize and reassure. And it's because that is what connects us. Helping someone regulate, like, it's okay, honey, it's okay, take deep breaths. That's jumping ahead to regulating. We have to relate first. And that, there's like fancy models of the brain I could be showing you, but that just shifts where your brain is sending all of its energy. The brain's top priority, more than food and water, is to be connected. Because imagine if you don't have food or water, if you have connections, you could get food or water, right? But if you don't have connections, you're done. And isn't it wild that like our brains just are built that way and know that? Like, of course, like you could read stories about that, you could read psychology about that. It makes sense. But man, our brains are also wired that way. So to get back to your question of empathizing, empathy is really important whether your kid is neurodivergent or not, and not even your kid, your spouse, your coworker, your partner, your friend. And so the fastest way to do that, and some of these phrases I'll borrow from collaborative problem solving, are you saying things like, man, there's something about that seems really tough. I'm so sorry. That's really seems like a lot to handle right now. Just acknowledging and affirming their experience first. It doesn't mean their behavior is okay, right? If they just like hit their sibling or something, we're not saying that the hitting was okay. What we're saying is, man, that is a big feeling, and that must be really tough to handle right now. You're not saying everything's going to be okay. You're not excusing it. You're just saying, wow, I see you. And you are showing me that this is really tough right now. Another kind of version of those phrases is, wow, there must be something really tough about whatever the expectation, or lately something has really seemed tough about that. I get it. I want to try to understand more. And that might be where you have to stop. Sometimes it's just like reassure and relate is all you can do in the moment. We
Right.
cannot jump to regulate and reason past that. I had a list of these, but I'll just go from my gut. Some other options are things like, "Hey, it's okay. We don't need to figure it out right now. I know this is really tough, and you're not in trouble right now. Okay." I just want to understand. And that's where you could kind of branch into asking questions eventually of that, like, I just want to understand. But the first step is really to empathize, and then you can get into problem solving conversations later. But you cannot get into problem solving conversations if you haven't first done that step of, there's something really tough about this expectation that seems really hard to handle. And the key language shift there for parents, teachers, staff, spouses is shifting it to focusing on the concern or the expectation rather than the kid. I'm not asking, why are you upset? I'm not even saying you're upset. I'm not saying anything about you, and I didn't even use the word you.
Mm.
I didn't say anything about you. And of course the kid's gonna know. They're not, they're like, I know you're talking about me, but you're talking about the expectation. And the frame is that big behaviors and big emotions come up when the current reality isn't matching the expectation. So naming what's hard about the expectation helps us backtrack to make the kid feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. It's just that expectation is too much right now. So some of those phrases of, hey, here's what I'm noticing, just, that must be really hard and affirming can then allow us to get to those next stages.
I love that you bring that into, because I know that we've talked about regulation on other podcast episodes as well, but then also just taking that step back to almost be like an observer, right? Of like, oh, I see this behavior happening. And again, it's on the behavior, it's on the expectation, it's not on the child, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so then that also like takes it away from them of like, we're not coming after you. We're not getting into this like
Right.
nagging sort of cycle or
Yeah.
circle.
Yeah.
What
And I want to reiterate, it doesn't mean that what they're doing is okay. You'll
Mhm.
get to that later though. Like you're going to have that problem solving conversation when they're in a regulated state later because it's probably a pattern. It's not a surprise, right? Like when there's big emotions, as parents, your kids, there's a pattern. These are phrases to both empathize and then come back to it later to be like, hey, I was there. I was connected with you when you were experiencing that. I am still here with you and I want to help us get through that together. Let's brainstorm some ideas together.
What is that next step, I guess? Like, is there like any standard for like, oh, I come back after 20 minutes and check in, or like do you kind of just have to feel it out with your kids? Like how do you continue the conversation later?
I would say it's a feel it out with your kids, but you can always use that phrase like, we are going to figure this out,
Mm,
right? You can say that in the moment. Like, we're going to figure this out. Um, and it depends on the kind of developmental stage of your kid, but that's part of the reassurance is that's really tough and we're going to figure it out. What you wouldn't say is, I don't want you to worry about it. Like, again, you're not taking things off the table necessarily. Like, it's important as parents to still have expectations. This isn't kind of allowing excuses, it's building understanding. And so I would say for some kids, and that's where it gets tricky for teachers sometimes, they send kids to the principal's office and then expect kids to be ready to apologize before they come back to class. We could have several podcast episodes on that, but like that's an unrealistic time frame. That's an unrealistic time frame. And it doesn't mean that they should come back to class or that they need to stay out or that they need to stay in timeout at home or I sat against the wall as a child. Um, but it's like you need to have a reasonable expectation that while you're empathizing and reassuring, like we're going to figure this out. Okay. We don't want to have to go through this. This seems like it is really hard. And the idea is by understanding the root of the problem, you can solve it rather than just expecting that reaction to change. And so I would say for a lot of kids, it's like after a good night's sleep, but it could also be like after they play and you can just sense that they're more like stable. I would say if you really want to solve the problem in a lasting way, wait until you're like ready to go get ice cream or like play some basketball with them and do something that they enjoy. But it's not necessarily like you can have a follow-up conversation with them, but you can't necessarily solve the problem durably, I would say until the next day
yeah. Okay. Well,
would be
and
my
then
gut
I'm
instinct.
thinking, I'm thinking too, like, because each of my children are different, and so families that are, I empathize with the families that are listening to me, like, oh my gosh, this
Yeah.
feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like, there are, like, I think is it okay to set that expectation too? Like, even if you do talk about it, the behavior is probably going to happen again, or it could also be like a trigger again. Like, it's not going to be like a one and done. Oh, great, we bought ice cream, we talked about it, we got a solution, great, it's no longer ever going to happen. It seems like it's going to be something that's ongoing. And so then maybe having some of those like scripts of like, okay, I know that I'm going to come back, we're going to solve this together. Um, and then making sure that you actually go back and take the time to at least
Yes.
talk it through and come
Yeah.
up with a solution.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
things like
And I
that.
would say that's where the grow model has that nice, like, what's the way forward?
Mhm.
I know collaborative problem solving has something called a litmus test they do, which is like, when can we check in to make sure it's working?
Yeah.
And then what I would also suggest is, again, it's all based on patterns. none of none of today's episode is about like just tantrums alone. It's like seeing patterns of behavior, and coaching kids. And part of coaching is anticipating when those triggers are going to come up. Right. Oh my goodness. There's so many transitions happening over the summer with school. You can anticipate the triggers that are going to come up for your kid, and you can plan ahead for those. Say, so I know sometimes when we go to the airport, like it can be really tough when there's all that noise. How's that going to feel? Anything you want to do kind of before we head out? How can we plan ahead for that, honey? Like, what can we do about that? So you can have those kind of preventive follow-ups, if that makes sense. Like, do you still want to try that? And don't hold them to their word. Again, kids are going to say solutions that they aren't experts. They don't know. Like, do you want to wear noise canceling headphones again, or not? Like, what do you want to do? What works for you? And then you can then kind of go back and do the reality check of like, okay, well, I don't know if we can get you Beats headphones by the time we take our trip. That's good. Right. I've had kids be like, oh, just give me those. That'll be fine.
Yeah.
So have those follow-up conversations using that collaborative approach. And okay, what makes that solution feel like it would work for you? And that's where all of today's episode is also about building that self-understanding. That by asking questions rather than suggesting or telling, you're giving your kids the gift of understanding themselves in a way that just telling them what to do, or getting headphones for all your kids just so you're ready to go and all set and like color coordinated and cute and ready, that doesn't build any self-understanding for them. So then when they're 13, how are they going to know what to do? So asking more questions helps them know how to navigate life for themselves, regardless of like what cute accessories you bought them. So
I have another question, and I'm not sure if it's for you or a follow up with Mindy too, but
try us both.
yeah, I'm just gonna ask because for like the younger kiddos who may be building some of that like self awareness and things,
Yeah.
um, are we as parents, I guess, maybe more asking and testing out things that are working and then just like talking them through it of like, hey, I saw that last time, going to the restaurant was very stressful and it was really loud. This is like a real scenario that happened with
Yeah.
my
Yep.
my kiddo.
Chimey. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
we one of the things that we started doing is we're like, hey, we're gonna look at the menu ahead of time to see, like, in case it is really loud, at least we'll know what we want to eat, and then we don't have to
Yeah.
make that decision in the moment when the waiter or waitress is at the table. And so we didn't necessarily like talk through all of the reasons why or like what else could we try. Like he was only
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 at the time.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
did give him language as he grew older about like, oh yeah, this is a strategy that helps us be prepared. And like, so we still pull up the menu and we like ask everybody what their order is and we just kind of like talk about it. So it's not even an isolating thing for him. It's just a general strategy. But I guess it kind of comes back to like that development piece of, is that okay to be testing things and then give them language as we grow, or should we like
Absolutely.
or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I'm pulling up another resource I have here that I've made for teachers, which is like at different stages of a lesson, how can you almost ask, like, we all as teachers would circulate to check in with kids. What you're describing is as a parent, you're almost like circulating in their life to check in. And so you can almost work backwards from what I've described, which is, hey, I know that when we go to restaurants, it seems like when we pull up that menu in advance, that really helps. What is it about going to a restaurant if we haven't done that that's really tough? And notice I haven't said the word you. I haven't
Yeah.
said why is that hard. I haven't said the word why. Always try to avoid why. That's a whole other thing, but like Google it. I have a whole training that's called like why not why. I haven't said the word why, but like what is it about restaurants sometimes that makes it tough to decide what you want? Okay, so what is it about pulling up the menu in advance? What do you think's been helpful about that? And that's building his understanding, like, cool, oh my goodness, props to you for figuring out that strategy in advance and just doing it. That's parenting. But as he gets older, we want to build that self-awareness of what is it about the context and what is it about the strategy that works, because then he can almost radiate those out into his life. Okay. I think there's something about loud noises. And I spoke with a kid, if you can imagine this. And when I first started teaching, I was like, I thought every kid wanted to go to recess. Why does this kid always like act up when it's time to go to recess? It turned out it was like too loud, and there was something about having that many kids around him that he thought were looking at him. Again, middle schooler, but still, there was something about the social almost glare of it right? We've all remember, I'd be horrified to walk into a middle school cafeteria still to this day if I didn't know where my friends were. Like,
Yep.
huh, right? And so just asking those kinds of questions helped this student and maybe your son identify, well, what is it about being around that many people? Or is it the noise? Is it the temperature? And you can start to almost take some guesses too, depending, you don't want to actually take too many guesses unless a kid really gets stuck, but you can offer some guesses and say, well, I know a lot of other kids sometimes feel this way, or I know sometimes I feel this. Do you agree with that or disagree? And that's where even these cards could help.
Yeah.
You can prepare the language of noisy, crowded, chaotic, people looking at you, weird smells. Like you can prepare those and have him sort those here of like, what is it about making decisions at restaurants that's tough as a starting point? And then he can almost add to these too of like, well, yeah, it's not just the smell, it's that I don't like sitting on the inside, I think, because then I feel trapped, right? Like, who knew? Like, more will always come up, but by having those guesses ready, but letting him sort them makes him feel like he's aware of his own patterns, which is really powerful.
I love that too. So we can be a little bit proactive, but then also at the same time, like
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
cycling. Like
Yes.
we're not doing them a disservice by like jumping in.
No.
So yeah, no, I think
No.
that's super helpful. Well,
Yeah.
as we wrap up, we do have a couple questions that were actually written
Okay.
in families that I would love to get your take
Nice.
on. We
Yeah.
call this the Ask Emmy segment since we do have an
Yes.
AI parenting coach. So
Okay.
one of the questions that we have is, I think my child might have ADHD, but I'm scared to label them.
Mhm.
What should I do?
Yeah, great question. And, we all live in a society. We all understand like who and how we are relative to other people. And at any time in history or any community, I'm up here in Massachusetts, the answer to that question may feel very different than Mississippi or California or Idaho. Like that may be different based on your context, your friends, and your community. And so I get that a lot, which is, and what some parents say is, I don't want it to be an excuse. No one wants to raise their kids to feel like they're making excuses for themselves. And I think what a diagnosis can do is what we've been describing this whole time. Is like, is this you? I even like it's just out of my reach, but I've actually done an ADHD symptom card sort with those same red, yellow, green cards before a family went to get their kid diagnosed. So it felt like the kid was in control of who they are. Not they got this label thrown at them, not that it was a surprise, not that it was some huge identity shift. It was grounded in, I think I put it in like kid-friendly language, but it's like, hey, which of these is true? And I tried to phrase them all as like they're not necessarily negative, right? Like competitive, energetic, um, fast. And, kids are always like, what do you mean fast? I'm like, well, what do you think fast? Is that true for you or not? You like, some kids think it's sports, some kids think it's doing work, but it's building that self-understanding. And so what a diagnosis can really help with is just getting clarity on who you are and how you are. It's not a good or bad thing. It just provides clarity. Now, a diagnosis itself is really designed for healthcare systems, right? It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It is to allow people to get certain services. So to that end, it can open up services. It can provide accommodations. But I just met with a college student yesterday who was nervous to tell her college about her disability because she thought they might judge her. And I said, it is up to you to decide what you share. They are legally, however, required to keep everything you share with them confidential until you agree with them what information is shared with your professors. So you can share that information with whoever you choose. You can share it with the school, but at the end of the day, whatever plan a school implements has to be signed off by a parent. So it's still under your full control what a school does with it or what you do with it. But for your own family's sake, the clarity goes so far. And the kid that I talked about who had this like wild transformation, he passed all his classes this year, by the way. He applied to he applied to a vocational high school, a regular high school, a private high school, and he's choosing which one to go to. He is the one I designed that card sort for, and his parents hadn't told him that he had ADHD. That's why he kept saying he was stupid. Because they kept saying to him, but you're so smart. You just need to try a little harder. And that was the most disempowering thing for him to feel because he felt like he was broken. Whereas the diagnosis allowed him to just say, okay, I'm not stupid. It's that focusing in boring classes that I don't care about is really hard. And I still have to do it, right? It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't that, oh, I have ADHD, so I don't have to focus. It was that, oh man, it is going to be really hard to focus for him. It turned out to be English class the next year, just because the dynamic of that teacher was less engaging. And he didn't use it. He doesn't want to use it as an excuse. Nobody wants excuses. And in fact, kids don't even want less work. Kids don't want accommodations. They want to not need them, but they want to understand kind of the strategies to use. And that's where our SMART strategies come in. Like, they want the strategies that can help them still perform at their best. So a diagnosis is not something to be scared of. It's a way to get some clarity for you and your kid.
And also, I feel like, as my experience as a classroom teacher, like, that was one of those like very empowering moments, right? Of like, oh, then I can begin to like advocate for myself, and I can look for those opportunities. And maybe like the grow model, right? Like, what are some of the obstacles from the can do models? Um, those, a little bit more reality check too, of like, oh yeah, this is gonna be hard for me. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, the last question that we have is, my child has big emotions and seems to constantly need feedback. Is that normal? And what do I do?
Yeah, good question. Again, that could be a whole nother podcast, but my favorite frame is that emotions are data. Emotions are really important signals that whatever we expected or whatever was expected of us. So if it's a child, it's often both. It's that we in our little child brains expected something, and a grown-up expected something that wasn't clear to us. And our reality is that we know, and now the adult knows, that we're not meeting it. And so I'm having a big emotion, right? That's where a tantrum comes in. And so that emotion says that either that expectation needs to be navigated more clearly and reasonably by the adult, and or we need to check in with our kids so that they're really aware of what the expectations actually are. Then part two is, in order to get the reality to be a little softer for them, we can offer kids the chance with that feedback to say, so what was it? Is there something about your reality that needs to change? Like, do you need more rest? Do you need to let someone know that your tummy hurts? Do you need to communicate with someone? Do we need to kind of change your kind of sensory environment? But emotions are a really helpful sign, actually, that something needs to change. It doesn't mean we need to expect less of kids. It doesn't mean we need to give in. What it is often, I think the shortcut to that answer is, something needs to be communicated one way or the other, either about the expectation or helping that kid advocate that it's okay if your tummy hurts and you can't go. You just need to let me know sooner, which I know that's its own challenge. So emotions, it's like, it's not, for kids, it's hard to say if emotions are typical or atypical. Often it's just a sign that something isn't clear to the kid and they're feeling really bad about not being able to meet the expectation. And I've come up with kind of a definition, which is, I think, what this is getting at, like a definition of neurodiversity, which is that it means that there are kind of four sections that someone might struggle with, and it's kind of an either or and. Like, it could be one of these things or all four. I'm going to see if I can remember all four because it's not in front of me. But to me, the neurodiversity umbrella means that someone has a hard time understanding what the expectation is in the first place, and or might have a hard time knowing how to meet it. Like, yeah, I know, but it's just not happening. And or they might have a hard time monitoring how the progress towards that expectation is going. And or they might have a hard time communicating what's hard about it for them. So if you want to test out all your different diagnoses with that model, it's like knowing what the expectation is in the first place. Often that may be something like autism, where it's like, well, that social norm, no one told me that, or they told me that, but it doesn't make sense to me, so I didn't do it. Part two is knowing how to get it done is often ADHD. It's like, oh my gosh, but I have so many things to do. I don't know how to get that done if I have all these other things to do. The third one is something maybe like depression or anxiety, of like monitoring how it's actually going might be inaccurate. You might be being too hard on yourself or too unrealistic. And then communicating how it's going to someone, or that you need something different, or advocating, is like life and could be any of those. So that's, I think, comes back to, if any of those have a gap, then an emotion is going to come up. So pausing and thinking about kind of which of those categories it is can help navigate, like, what is that emotion trying to tell us?
That's super helpful. And I love that you have the visual too of your fingers because then it's like, okay, yes, I can make this connection too, or like more easily recall the information. But yeah, Laurel, I
Well,
just
good thing it's not 6. That gets messy, but
all right.
5 or less.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you so much for being incredibly thoughtful and what an empowering conversation too. Like, hopefully this is like a stress reliever for families that are listening in of like, you have more tools, kind of a renewed mindset too about how to approach, these challenges with your kiddos. But you reminded us that really helping our kids thrive starts with helping them understand themselves, and that
Absolutely.
sometimes the most powerful thing that we can do as parents is just to ask better questions, which you gave us so many great question stems to start from today. To our listeners, if you are interested in learning more about Laurel's work or the coaching model used at Research ILD, be sure to check the show notes for all of the links, all of the resources that were mentioned today. Thank you again for joining us on the Launch Family Podcast. Whether your child is just starting their self-awareness journey or you're navigating teen independence, we're here to help you parent with clarity, compassion, and connection.